Welcome to another episode of NICTITATIng Presents. As always, I am Sean M. Thompson, and my guest today is Joe Koch. How you doing?
Hi, doing good. How are you, Sean?
Not bad, can't complain. So Joe, you had the Wingspan of Severed Hands. That was 2020, correct?
Technically 2019. It came out like right at the end of 2019.
Oh, okay, wow. And that was from Weird Punk Books. And
Yes, it was.
pretty soon you're going to have something called, I'm sorry, is it a novella or a short story collection, Convulsive?
Short story collection.
Okay, so you're going to have a collection called Convulsive out from Apocalypse Party Press.
Yes.
All right, good. I got them both right. So I tend to ask most people this to start. When did you start writing, actively seeking publication?
Probably around 2015 or so. And I guess it's kind of unusual that I'm not one of those people who spent my whole life wanting to be a writer. I spent most of my life doing visual arts and, pursuing that on the side in addition to day jobs.
Yeah.
And I don't know, things just kind of changed for me around 2015 where doing visual art wasn't saying anything that I wanted to say. I just felt like I'd done everything I wanted to do with that.
So when you say visual art, do you mean like paintings or photography or films or what?
Oh, painting, drawing, very hands-on stuff.
Okay.
No, I never worked much with photographs or film. Not at all. Not at all with film. And just casual photography.
So you were, you drew and you painted and you decided you wanted to be able to express yourself through words.
I guess it just kind of worked out that way because I've always been a reader.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
Kind of evolved into that. And I had really good luck with, it's kind of funny, like first thing that I sent to like a little fairy tale journal, sort of a little handmade fairy tale journal, through the University of Hawaii of all places. That was accepted. So the first time I sent something out, I got an acceptance. I didn't get paid for it, but that was like a little bit of encouragement that I probably needed pretty badly starting out. And I've gone through like down times with lots of rejections, like all of us do when we do short stories and go through the whole grind of sending them out, waiting to hear back.
I was going to say that's pretty lucky. The first time you subbed, you got accepted.
Oh man. Oh yeah. I mean, and I think that everybody needs a boost like that starting out because you feel like you're just stumbling in the dark. You don't know what you're doing. So I try to pay that forward a little bit. I try to, when people have asked questions or, just in general being encouraging, giving advice, to other writers who are starting out. Because there's not really a handbook for how to get into it. You kind of figure it out along the way.
Yeah. I mean, I started with sort of similar. I started with contributor copies. So I guess technically I was selling stories, but it wasn't for money. It was more to be in a book. And then from there, I eventually went, well, let's see if I can get paid for this. So
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's cool. It seems like Wingspan of Severed Hands has been doing pretty well.
It's gaining a little bit of momentum, I guess. When it came out at the end of 2019, obviously we're in the middle of COVID starting up. And
yeah, it's a tough time.
It was. And I think releasing a book at the very end of the year is not a great idea either. At least for the writer, because you just released your book, but all the yearly lists of bests are coming out and you're not going to be on them because nobody's read your book. So just in terms of like tactics, I don't think I would release a book at the tail end of the year again, unless I just didn't care about any of that, which is also a valid goal, to be honest.
It is.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people are picking it up and reading it, and it's just sort of gradually gaining momentum by word of mouth, I guess.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. I mean, I suppose it's a novelette called Astrum I put out in, It was 2021. How do I forget? I'm literally the press that put it out too.
Oh, no, I understand. It's hard to keep track of everything when you're busy and you got a lot of projects going.
I think I wanted to say I put it out last summer. Let's stick with that.
Okay.
But yeah, and then it did pretty good initially, but I was like, all right, it'll just kind of peter out. But like more and more people have been checking it out lately, which is nice.
Oh, that's good. So it's one of those things where it's got kind of building up as it goes instead of coming out big right at the outset, eh?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was
Cool.
sort of funny. I got this podcast I hadn't heard of was like, oh, we're thinking about covering your story, and I was like, oh, cool, thinking it would be like a little 10-minute aside type thing. And they did like an hour-long review of it, and I was like, my God, like this is easily the longest analysis
Nice.
of any of my stuff that's ever came out. And here I was thinking it was going to be a little 5-minute, like, oh yeah, we read Astrum, it was pretty good. Anyway, moving on.
Isn't it really interesting to see what people say about your writing
It's
after
interesting
it
and
comes out?
nerve-wracking.
Well, yes. It's really fascinating what different takes people have, like what they focus on. You might think that there's an aspect of a work that really stands out, that you labor over and really think about a lot, and people just breeze past that and they focus on something else. You just never know.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Like, well, I guess with Astrum, I'm not going to spoil it, but there was a part in particular I was like, okay, I suspect this is gonna, make a lot of waves. Like specifically this part right here. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've had that happen with whole books. Like my first novel, I released myself, and I thought, wow, this is gonna be like pretty big, and then it more or less like it's gained traction in the last couple of years, but yeah, it kind of released to crickets, which is honestly not that weird. I mean, it happens a lot. Um,
Yes.
and then like Astrum, I did that as a 99-cent ebook because I was like, oh well, I just like to put it out, but like whatever, no one's probably gonna read it, and I mean, in the last couple of years, that's been my most popular thing. So you never really know.
Yes, yes. And I mean, I'm just grateful anybody reads anything. There was a recent question about would you still write if nobody read your work? Like it was a question somebody posed on Twitter. And it's a very weird conundrum for me that yes, I would still write because there are things that I'm exploring and I'm working through thinking about putting it on paper matters to me or typing it on the computer as the case may be. So I'd still be writing, but there is a lot of satisfaction in having a dialogue instead of a monologue, in knowing somebody read it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I'm similar. People have asked me like, would you still write if nobody read it? And I kind of jokingly say, well, I mean, that was like early career. Like I was
Yeah, we've all
writing
done
and
that,
putting it out, and
haven't
no one
we?
was reading it. So that's more or less what it was.
Yeah, and I have to trick myself into thinking that nobody's going to read something because I just like just the way I'm nervous about like, doing a podcast, talking to you, or
Yeah,
anybody. It's like the idea somebody's going to read this, it kind of makes me more stiff, makes me less like, doesn't let the words and the ideas and the images flow in the way that they need to. So it's like, I've got to trick myself into thinking nobody's ever going to read this to really kind of get in that zone where I want to be and really have things flowing, so to speak.
no, I mean that makes sense. I've done a number of books now, so the good news is that like most of them don't sell more than 100 copies. So I'm never that
Aw.
nervous about at least for now. I mean, don't get it twisted. I'm sure I'll put out a book soon enough and it'll be like, I don't know, 1,000 copies sold, and then I'll start getting sweaty like, oh god, people are actually reading this.
Well, I hope that people will read the collection when it comes out. It's coming out in April of 2022,
Okay.
and it's through Apocalypse Party Press. That's the really a very small press, but they've put out a couple of my favorite books recently: Terminal Park by Gary Shipley and Negative Space by B.R. Yeager.
Oh, they
So
did Negative Space. Okay.
yes, yes. So I was like, well, and they mentioned they were open for horror collections right about the time I was thinking about looking around. And I'm like, this seems like a good fit. Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem. I mean, that's awesome that you got it. That you're getting it out.
Yeah, this will
They
be
seem like a
my
cool press.
absolutely, absolutely. And this will be my first release with my name, Joe Koch, Joe. Previous to that, I was published under my birth name, Joanna Koch. I don't know.
Yeah.
People are confused by that. I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of confusion, but most of the recent releases that have come out are updating the name. So it's all, just clear, straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, at the very
And
least, it's like in terms of the amount of letters, it's not that huge of a switch, which I think will help people.
yes.
Um, it's not like it's still similar sounding. I mean, um,
Yeah, I mean,
so
people have been
yeah,
calling me Joe a long time, so it just seemed about time to get the publications in order, have that catch up with real life.
yeah, no, that makes sense. I always wonder about that sort of stuff. Like, if I ever got a bigger book deal and they were like, "We want you to go by your middle name as well," like, how does that work? Like, do you just have something in a different name and then your older work just stays how it is?
Well, I'm going to find out, so I'll let you know when I
That's
get
true.
the
Let me know. Yeah.
when I get the lowdown on how this all works.
So, so I've read a little bit of Wingspan of Severed Hands. Admittedly, not a ton of it. Do you have like I guess what would be your quick kind of synopsis of what that book is about, if you can?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's a difficult book to do a synopsis for. Probably my favorite descriptions from readers are generally when they say, wow, this is a big mind trip. It's, really psychedelic or really transformative and, wildly poetic and stuff like that. But in terms of plot or actual structure,
Yeah.
it is about three female characters. One is a teenager who's being coerced into marrying a rapist, frankly. Is that okay to say? I don't know if
That's fine.
you have like spoiler things going on.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I mean, I'll just that's I can add a little thing at the beginning of the episode too.
yeah, or I could rephrase it that we can just say that the teenager is being pressured into a marriage that she doesn't want.
Okay, yeah, I'll edit out the first part.
Yeah. And there's a parallel plot where there's a disease of madness or insanity taking over the world, basically. And so there is a scientist who's the director of a program in a basically military bunker kind of place, and they're developing
Yeah.
a sentient weapon. And the development of the weapon goes according to the life development of Hymenoptera, which are bugs that are like butterflies. But
Oh, okay.
a lot of other insects develop through 4 stages, and those are the 4 sections of the book. So I'm probably going to forget it because I'm nervous, but it's like larva, pupa, whatever. I'm sorry, my mind's
No,
blanking
that's
out.
fine. I mean, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head either.
I should know this
Um,
though, because I actually, know it pretty well. So the weapon becoming sentient is like, I thought it was a lot of fun to write and to explore that. And that's basically the third character of the three female characters, but it doesn't become a character until much later in the book. So you probably haven't even gotten an inkling of that yet if you just
no,
started.
no, I'm very early days into it.
And it's
You have
not
an
the easiest
interesting,
read.
yeah, you have an interesting style. I kind of like that you can sort of get lost in the poetics of it and sort of the atmosphere and the description, and you can almost go a couple pages and go, well, wait, hold on a second, and then
Yeah.
you're like, oh right, okay, yes. But I like that though.
Well, it's a mood. It's, you have to be in the mood for it. I
Well, that's true.
I don't want to read something like that every day when I'm reading.
No, I guess
Sometimes,
that's true too. It depends
yeah,
what your mood is.
yeah, sometimes I want something much more straightforward. Um, and hopefully at the beginning, the parts that take place with the scientists developing the weapon, um, read fairly straightforward. I don't know if you got
Yeah,
that far.
I haven't gotten there yet. I think I'm pretty close.
Okay. Well, if you hang on, you'll get past the big poetic dump at the beginning.
Sorry.
And then there's a pretty straightforward, although there's a lot of technical language about neuropsychology and stuff, which was also so much fun to research. And there's a relationship plot between a couple of the scientists. So you'll have the two contrasting styles, two contrasting stories, and then these are going to gradually interweave throughout. And
Yeah, I mean,
without getting into a lot of spoilers, that's probably about all I should tell you about it.
okay, yeah, I mean, that's probably more than enough. Yeah. It's interesting you chose to write about a kind of a madness plague. I actually have a story called Screaming Creatures that's more or less the same thing.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, not with bugs or anything, but yeah, I wanted to tackle I kind of had it in my head like I'd like to do sort of a story approaching my fears about climate change,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't want to just have it be like a straight one to one, like the world is very hot now and that's the horror. So I was wondering, like, well, how could I kind of approach it? And I kind of came at it from like a madness plague angle.
That's a great angle. And when people are like living in uncomfortable temperatures, like especially a hot temperature, crime rates go up. So there's
Yeah,
a
actually, I
whole,
said it in, it's like near future, so I said it in 2030, and I have like little things like I mentioned it takes place in New Mexico, and I mentioned that it goes up to like 125 some days.
oh yeah, people would be
Um,
murdering each other at that hot.
yeah,
Oh my
that's
God.
sort of what ends up happening.
Absolutely. But it's kind of fun to take a plot like that. I mean, it's not the most original idea, like you and me have both thought of
No,
it.
no,
But a plot like that gives you a chance to write madness, and that's fun. That's fun to
it is.
explore.
I liked and I enjoyed it too because it's like I guess it depends who's writing that, but I just thought, well, okay, so the obvious like horror thing would be, people getting violent. But
Hmm.
then I was like, but not everybody would get violent if they went crazy. So I have like some guy who's just like in a movie theater, like spilling sodas onto people and like bumbling about stuff, and so it's like it just like runs the gambit of like all sorts of weird. Or they at one point I mentioned there's a celebrity that live streams. Um, I think he puts like tomato soup into his pool and starts swimming in it or something.
That sounds really uncomfortable.
It does, yeah. And it's
Nice.
like
Very nice.
it's not necessarily violent, although to be honest, there might have been a mass murder during that as well.
It's
A
funny
lot of
how
things you forget.
you can't even remember your own stories after a while, right?
Yeah, it sort of gets that way. I mean, becoming an editor now too, so not only do I have my own stuff kind of kicking around in my head, I'm like I have a couple other books I'm editing for the press that are like in there too. So I'm like, okay, wait, no, that's this. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I did want to bring that up to you. So you're going to be editing an anthology soon, correct?
Yes, yes. We just closed submissions today for Stories of the Eye, which is um, through Weird Punk Books, and I'm
Yeah.
co-editing with Sam Richard. So it's my first time out. I'm not doing it all on my own, which is probably good. Um,
It's a lot of work, yeah.
Plus, I mean, I just feel like, I don't know if I have the confidence to just say, I want this story, this story, this story, and telling people, talking to people about making changes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I commiserate because
I don't want to do
I
it
do
all on
have
my
ideas
own.
eventually to do anthologies, but I'm like, oh my God, having to go through a large amount and then having to reject people, like, probably stories that I like, even having to go, sorry, it doesn't work right now.
There's a lot of that. I mean, there's definitely like, I don't know percentage wise, but there's way more good material in what I've
Yeah.
read. I've read a lot of the subs already. Um, Although we're not getting back to people right away. I don't know when
Right, right.
this
That makes
will
sense.
air, but there's so many more really good stories that may not be the exact vibe that I'm looking for.
Yeah, in a way, it'd almost be easier if there was just a lot of. I don't think this would ever happen, but it was just a lot of bad stories, and you're like, okay, well, I obviously don't want these.
I thought there would be a lot
Um,
more really bad stories because it is very easy with computer technology and the internet to submit fiction.
yeah,
Back before the internet, because I'm old, so I know about this, you would have had to type things up on a physical typewriter, have
yeah,
it printed out and mail it with a return envelope and all this kind of stuff. Um, so it's very easy to submit fiction. And I'm actually very thankful that we didn't get like a million weirdos in the wrong way coming out of the woodwork. Weirdos in the right way
that's
I
fair.
like.
Yeah, I had this idea for a UFO anthology. I'm sort of glad I'm putting it off because I'm just dreading it.
A UFO, you said?
Like aliens or a UFO
I
anthology
know
thing.
you're
I think I was
asking
probably
for
gonna
it.
do it. I was probably gonna do invites and then have some like a couple spots for submission. But I mean, like you, I couldn't find anybody yet to co-edit, so I'm like, I'm not just doing this myself. That's
Uh-huh.
a lot.
Yeah, we did several invites. So we have a few invited authors in addition to the open call.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to do it.
Yeah, invites are great, I mean, because then you're pretty much hand selecting people that you know their work, you know you know their style, they're responsible, they're going to get things done on time, and they can say yes or no, and it's a good way to kind of get the core of the book.
Yeah,
But I'm really, really glad we did the open call because there's some just glorious, wonderful things that have come through. And I'm not even done reading, so I can't wait to finish.
yeah. I mean, that's really cool. Do you ever think going forward after this, you're gonna keep editing, or is it kind of gonna be a case by case basis? Like,
Oh,
is it gonna come down to like how you feel about?
I
Do you want
mean,
to do another one?
I want to see how, I'd like to see how this pans out in terms of doing the actual editing of the pieces. So, I mean,
Right,
selecting
yeah. Because that's the
stories.
actual hard. The fun part is kind
Yeah.
of like inviting people, and then it's a little stressful to reject. But then the actual work part is like, oh, I actually have to edit these now.
I mean, I hate to say I feel comfortable rejecting people, but I do. I mean, this is part
No,
of
no, that's
the way
fine.
it
Yeah,
works. Not everybody can be accepted. I've had plenty of rejections too, and it's
no,
not.
it just comes with the territory.
Yeah, I don't feel bad about it. In fact, especially with good stories, it's like you're going to find the right home for this, so I'm going to give this back to you. Take this, find the right home for it because it deserves it. Like if we're not the right place for it, it's just, I think it's a bad vibe. I don't know. I don't have a good way to put it. Anyway,
No, no, I understand. But so the actual editing part is what you're kind of.
I want to see how that goes with, yes, with the nuts and bolts of changes to stories and how I'd like to see how the finished product is received by readers
Yeah, I mean that's always important.
before I really know if, how successful it's been.
I mean, I'd love to tell you if somebody like today invited me to do a thing like an anthology with them, I'd just go yes, but I don't know.
I mean, I kind of love it. I did, Cemetery Gates Media, invited me to judge their monthly contest, their monthly
Oh,
flash
okay,
fiction contest. And I can't remember which month it was. I apologize.
that's
Um,
fine.
so that was pretty cool. You know that it's going to be flash, so nothing over 1,500 words.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah.
and I guess we got like, I don't know, 30 or so entries. And I really loved it. It was just really exciting to see all the
Yeah,
different
that's actually a pretty
ideas.
good way to like segue into it, actually.
Hmm. Yeah, slush reading is so much fun because you see all of these ideas. Um, it's also a good way to say, oh, this is being done over and over. Like if you see the same idea multiple times. So as a
Yeah.
writer, I'm going to go do something different with that.
No, that's true. That's a good call. Um,
I sound pretty
yeah, I mean,
calculating, I guess, but
no, that's just happens. I mean,
yeah.
I've only so far I've only edited novellas, so I have a very specific kind
Oh,
of
okay.
editorial process so far, which is like more or less like, hey, it's somebody I already know, and then I'm in some ways it makes it harder actually because it's people I know and I'm friends with, and then I have to go in and be like, okay, so you got to change this and this and move this around, and in a way, like people that were more or less strangers, it would be easier to do because I wouldn't have the "I already
Do you
know you"
think?
thing going on. I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't be.
Huh.
To be honest, I haven't. I mean, I guess I've sort of like there are people that I don't know as well that I'm editing, so
Hmm.
I guess that's almost counts.
Yeah, I think
But
I
the
would
thing is, I usually
feel
get to know them when I'm in the process of editing.
you
So
do, you do. Yeah, I would feel overwhelmed editing a novella. That would be because I mean, I've only written one novella
yeah,
that has been published. Everything else has been short stories.
yeah,
Um, and just having the I don't know, maybe I'd be good at that. I don't know, man. Maybe I'll try it.
yeah.
I'm
I mean, it's
kind of up
definitely
for anything.
that's a good way to be. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I mean, I hate to say I feel like I'm suited to it because that sounds a little cocky, but I mean, I feel like I'm doing okay at it. Um, I will say I'm a much better content editor than I am like a nuts and bolts grammar person. So,
Oh, okay. Okay.
well, I mean, like I know the mechanics. I'm just not. Uh,
You'll have to forgive me. I'm not really super familiar with your press. I don't know if you guys have put a lot of books out yet.
no, no. I mean, it's funny because like since I run the press and I'm the chief editor, like it feels like I've done a lot of books because behind the scenes I am doing a lot of books. But in terms of actual releases, we have two, print and two like regular print and ebook style releases, and then one ebook only, and two of those are me. So
Oh,
when it's like
okay.
me putting out me, it's like, oh, okay, this barely counts.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Maxwell Bauman, I put out his novella mid October, so that actually wasn't that long ago.
What is the name of it?
But House of Blood and Teeth,
Okay.
and I was kicking myself because it's like, we worked on the title, like behind the scenes. We're like, well, this one, no, maybe this one, and then Haley Piper came out with Queen of Teeth, and I was like, oh, that fits so well, but it's also like so similar to House of Blood and Teeth. But I mean, there's only so many words in the English language also, and it's like, well, if someone comes up with a similar enough title, it's similar wavelengths, and everyone's kind of dipping into the same kind of stew all the time anyway.
That is something that
Um,
actually bugs me a lot, that when titles are not distinctive or interesting, or they sound like the same over and over. Um,
what I didn't even think
that
about was there's a lot of fantasy books that have like House of, and I was like, oh, of course, yeah. Why didn't I even? Because it's a haunted house book and it's like body horror, so I was like, okay, yeah, like House of Blood and Teeth that kind of fits with the body horror haunted house thing. Not
Yeah.
even thinking about like there's probably a million fantasy books that are like House of Blank. Um, I mean, it
Yeah.
is what it is. It's out now. I can't do anything about it.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a great title. Nothing wrong with it. Um, I worked pretty hard on coming up with the title for the Wingspan of Severed Hands, to make sure that it reflected the book being kind of unique, kind of had
Yeah.
the sound and rhythm of something a little bit different.
Yeah.
Not because it started with it's also a takeoff on a Grimm's fairy tale, which is called The Maiden Without Hands. So
Okay.
kind of the obvious working title was The Girl with No Hands. And this fairy tale literally has amputations in it. It's very dark, and it's not one of the ones that you see in the kids' storybooks
I
very
mean, I would
often.
hope not. Yeah.
If you get really into fairy tales, especially the German ones, the Grimms, they
Oh yeah,
are
they don't mess
gruesome.
around.
They're the best. So I had written a lot of short stories before this novella where I took fairy tale ideas and reworked them for my own purposes.
Yeah.
And having read this Girl with No Hands fairy tale, I thought, well, it's really awful. And the character is not empowered in it, the female character at all. And it has no happy ending. Yes. So that was my working title, The Girl with No Hands. And then I thought, I'm like, okay, you could do a horror book with a title like that, right? Sounds pretty average, kind of typical. And I was like, no, that just doesn't really capture this.
Well, then you're also getting into like, there's so many The Girl.
Oh God,
something
right?
Titles, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty tired of that.
Yeah. I mean, titles are, oh man, especially running a press. I don't know if everyone's like this, but I hyper focus on titles. Like I will spend days, months, even just like I'll just shoot out. Because I'll talk to my writers a lot, and I'll at random be like this title, and they're like, yeah, I don't know, maybe this part, and then I'm like, all right, this, and I think it makes for a good finished title because it's like it's not like I'm just like this is the title, we're done. Like I try to like back and forth with people to try to come up with something organically.
You find you have to change the titles from what the writers bring you in a lot of cases?
I mean, that's a loaded question.
Oh,
I don't know if I have to.
Maybe not phrased very well. I apologize.
No, it was fine. I'm just sort of.
I'm kind of grilling you about the behind the scenes publishing
stuff. No, it's
so.
fine. I appreciate it. I get a little obsessive just about titles because I love titles. That sounds like a weird thing to say, but like I don't know. I just I come from sort of a.
I love a good title
weird to
too.
say I come from a film background because I don't. I love like movies and shows. I mean, I love all media, but so when you go through just like so many titles, though, you do find similarities. You're like, okay, it's going to be this sort of a rhythm. It's going to be this style, and so I try to be cognizant of what titles are out and do something that fits well enough, but also isn't like exactly the same. But I didn't even actually answer your question.
That's okay. You don't have to.
No, I can. So far, I mean, there were a couple titles Maxwell had first that we ended up changing. They weren't bad titles. They were just sort of like, I felt like, yeah, they're good enough, but maybe we try for something else. And then, the other people I've been working with, it sort of depends how far along in the process we are in terms of like a release. Like Paula Ash, we've come up with the title. I'm doing her collection probably in February. But we've been working together for a year now. So like we've had plenty of like this title. And then she says this one. And I'm like, some of the newer books I'm thinking about or writers,
You're publishing Tiffany Morris's collection, right?
I am, yes. I'm doing Tiffany Morris's.
I love Tiffany's work.
It was funny how I found out about her too, because I mean, I guess going back to the whole kind of submissions versus invite, I try to stay open to things. So, but my plan for 2022 was okay, like kind of more novellas. I have my own book I'm going to release, a novel. And more or less that was kind of the plan. And then Michael Adams, who did Planet X publications, who had done one of my books before called Farmington Correctional, um, he was like, "Have you ever heard of Tiffany Morris?" And I was like, admittedly, no. Why? And he's like, "Well, she's trying to shop this poetry collection, and I thought you might be a good fit." And at first I was sort of like, "Oh man, poetry? I haven't done poetry yet." Like, but I was like, "All right, let me read it. I'll decide." And then I read it, and I was just like, "Oh wow, okay, yep." Um,
I just feel like she's on another level. But I feel that way about poets. Like, okay, they're smarter than me. They're on another level. And when they do it well, it's like, I know it when I see it. I wouldn't even presume to edit them.
oh, that's the scary part. Is I've told her already a couple of times. I'm like, so I've edited novellas and short stories. I I don't I haven't edited poems yet, so I'm gonna do my best. Like, but it's a lot more. It probably will come down to like, could you maybe please change this word? Maybe. Um, because yeah, it is so much more. Like, I'm much more comfortable with like, okay, here's the shape of this wider story. I feel like it would work better if we kind of changed this part, like plot wise. I know that, but when it's a poem, it does come down to like single words, so you really gotta like dig in. So I mean, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I feel like with poetry, when it's good, I'm just along for the ride. Just take me there.
Yeah, no, that's how I feel. I mean, yeah, she definitely, yeah, she's good. We have I don't know if I want to say it on air, but we have a working title right now, and I don't. She might have actually announced it too. I don't know. That's one thing I never know about with titles is like, do you just I like to hold them kind of close to my chest because I don't want people to take them. Um, maybe that's just neurotic, but it does happen sometimes.
Okay.
Um, I mean, it's one of those things you can never prove either. But and then you're like, well, was it intentional or again, is it just a similar wavelength kind of a thing? Um, but yeah, I can tell you off air what the title of her thing is. At least for now.
Well, I did also put a lot of thought into the title of the collection. Um, One of my thoughts was I want it to be one word. So it's just
Okay.
very simple, kind of easy to remember, or at least distinctive in being just a single word. And the word convulsive actually is just a shortcut for a quote from Andre Breton that beauty must be convulsive or not at all. And Breton's like the big surrealist writer from the original
Yeah.
surrealist movement. I'm sure you know who he is, right?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. I mean, some people don't. I don't want to be like super
I haven't
pretentious.
read a lot of him, but I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just sort of something that I'm into from my art background. And I've always loved that quote. I just think that's a great quote. I had a recent short story published that was titled Convulsive or Not at All. So again, an abbreviation of that quote. Um,
Is that story going to be in the collection?
it will not, no.
Oh,
It will
okay.
not be in this collection. It's in a book called In the Shadow of the Horns, which is a black metal horror anthology.
Oh, yeah, I heard of that.
um, so um, I'm in that. I'm also going to have a new story in a Kate Bush centered anthology. So I guess I'm making the musical rounds in my writing
Yeah, I
these
was going to
days.
ask you actually. I noticed you're in the black metal book. What is your musical taste like in general?
Well, I was in high school in the 80s, early 80s. So, I mean, my own taste probably dates back to that, like Swans, Einstürzende Neubauten. I like, Nick Cave,
Yeah, yeah,
Skinny Puppy. I'm kind of lean more towards industrial. And then I liked Coil, quite a lot. They're not around anymore, obviously.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I actually chose the band Coil as the theme for, the Cemetery Gates flash fiction contest. And it was really fun because like the people who know Coil, the band, were like,
Yeah.
yes, and they were really into it. And then a lot of people were like, what's that? And, weren't too thrilled. But we got some beautiful entries, like really beautiful writing inspired by the music. Anyway, yeah, my musical taste is, I mean, it does date back a lot. And then I
Yeah.
guess, I don't know, what do I have? I don't know. I don't keep up with music really well these days. I'll be
That's
really
fair.
honest
I
about that.
mean, there's a lot to rifle through, so.
And I've had the good fortune of having roommates or partners who were my DJs, so I didn't have to think about it. So right now I'm like, oh, I'm, living alone and I've just got my little ridiculous CD collection. So whatever's there is what I listen to.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. I kind of view it like with fiction itself, like I like to stay up to date with what is kind of current and coming out, but at the same time, there is a part of me that really loves to just be able to go, I don't know, a random book from 1975 that's maybe not even horror. Boom. Like
Yes.
just it's nice to be able to, you have your lane that's like kind of where you're situated writing wise or editing wise, and then it's nice to just be able to just be like, and here's this thing that's kind of completely unrelated.
Yes. Another thing I often think about while we're talking about music and writing, when I look at different types of authors and the different ways that they approach writing, I do like to think about if I'm discouraged, with my work not being accepted, or I get you get in that head mode where you're comparing
Oh yeah,
yourself
I
with other
know.
people.
You're just laying in bed awake at 3 in the morning, and you're like, "Am I even that good? Why am I doing
Well,
this?"
I'm not that bad,
Okay.
but
I mean, no, I don't get that. I don't do that. That wasn't last night. Um,
oh no, Sean.
no, it's fine. I'll get over it.
Anyway, we all do go
No,
through that. And so I like to think about it like music genre. So like I've got Mark Etzel and Einstürzende Neubauten, sitting out
yeah,
on my little CD table. And those are just vastly different styles of music, but I like them both. And the
yeah,
same
it's
thing with
true.
writing. So there's a time and a place for, the slow build up, really detailed gothic kind of piece where there's no big reveal or really dramatic violence. And then there's a time where you want to read a story that's like action and horror and gross out and lots of gore. It just depends on your mood or what you are up for or
Yeah, that's
what you're
true. That is a good way
seeking.
to think about it. It is easy to get sort of myopic and go like,
Oh,
"This is the
yes.
one true style of writing." When it's like, no,
Yes.
it's not. That's not art. There's so many different variations, which is what makes art interesting, frankly.
Yes. And like just
Um,
saying there's room for all these different styles, different approaches is just a great way to say, oh, let's just invite everybody to the party.
no, it is a cool way to do it. Did you? I just thought of this actually. When you were writing, or when you were compiling Convulsive or deciding to do it, is there sort of a? Is it more of just a generalized kind of these are my stories I think are the best collection, or is it sort of themed in terms of okay, I'm noticing I'm doing this kind of a theme a lot. Maybe I should compile stories like this together.
It's a combination of both those things.
Okay.
So it has the oldest stories from 2018 and the newest story is from 2021 from this year.
Yeah.
And I tried to take obviously the highest quality pieces because
Right. Yeah.
I've had about 50 short stories published and there's only 15 in the book. So
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
high quality was important, But then after that, I wanted them to thematically cover lots of genders in terms of like protagonists, pronouns, um,
Yeah.
gender changes or gender staticness. And I wanted them to cover the themes of religion and abuse. And I feel like there's other stuff that's floating in my head that I can't grab right now.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. I mean, that's okay. So yeah, sort of both. Um,
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. And in terms of theme, a lot of the work I have been doing does talk about like abuse, gender, religion. Those are definitely strong themes that come up and get kind of interwoven with whatever else might be happening.
well, that's cool. Yeah. I was thinking when I asked, I was thinking in terms of my own stuff, and for some reason, my collections to date have all been sort of like I go through my stories at the time and go, I keep sort of writing about this. So let me take these and put that into this. Like, first thing I put out was Too Late in 2016. I self published that because I had noticed I had all these stories where it was either the main action had already occurred and the story was somebody kind of ruminating on this tragic event or trauma that had already occurred, or it was sort of this kind of like fatalist, like it was almost like the characters in the story were just destined for this kind of tragedy. Um, and so that was Too Late. And then when I came to Screaming Creatures, admittedly, I had sold more stories at that point, so it was like, okay, well, I sold this one and this one and this one. But I noticed a lot of them were about insanity, like madness, which is what the title is kind of relating to, like humans as screaming creatures. Um,
Yeah.
but so yeah, I don't know. So I'm always curious how people decide on like short story collections and because you talk to 10 different writers, they all have 10 different answers.
hmm I thought about it a long time. I mean, obviously, with the quantity of stories I've had published, I had an adequate quantity
Yeah.
a year or two ago to publish a collection. And I deliberately waited longer and, waited to curate something that a lot of what a lot of what I do, I don't necessarily have the best way to articulate it, which probably sounds weird for somebody who does writing. But like I said, writing's not my first love. Um,
Yeah.
but I definitely took time to wait until there was a solid, powerful collection instead
Yeah.
of just a bunch of stories.
I think that's a good way to do it. I mean, I've told people this already, but yeah, and I mean, I haven't had so many stories published, but I've written, I mean,
Well, and a
I
lot of
started
people,
writing in like 2010, so it's probably been over 100 that I've written,
yeah,
probably
and
more
a lot of
short
people will
stories.
write their stories for their collection. A lot of people don't, publish a collection that's stuff that has been published before. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people, it's all original to the collection. In this case, everything in it has been published before, but I think it's still worth picking up the collection to have everything in one place.
Well, I think of it like,
And the new edits, the cohesiveness, everything like that makes it kind of
yeah, it's
kind
like,
of worth it.
an anthology is almost like a soundtrack. It's like you've got all these different voices and kind of styles, and they sort of like blend together into this one sort of compilation album. But then when you're doing your own,
Hmm.
I guess for lack of a better term, album, it's like you get to see how
Oh
the
yeah, it's very
specific
different.
thing, yeah,
Hmm.
it plays different, yeah.
Absolutely, the stories read differently, and they feel more powerful when they're all together instead of interspersed with other authors.
Yeah, no, it's true. I've actually, yeah, I've talked with a lot of people about like, like how do you compile and how do you pick what? Because like I don't know if I'm aberrant, but I definitely had. It's like okay, so I've had this amount published, and I know some people would just go, cool, put them together, boom, that's your book. And I just I don't like doing that. Like, I'm kind of like, okay, here's 5 perfectly viable stories I've had published. They don't seem to fit, though, so I'm putting them aside. Which I don't know if that's maybe the best career advice, but that's what I do.
Well, I guess you're choosing quality over quantity. So I think that's always a good
I mean, it's not
choice.
even necessarily a quality thing, because some of the stories I decided not to use for Too Late. I mean, Too Late is super short. It's like a chapbook. It was going to be 10 stories. And I just read through all 10 and I was like, I'm not thrilled with these 5. And so, since it was just me doing it, I was like, well, why don't I just get rid of them and make it a super short book? So I did.
Just got to go with your gut sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, so, but it does mean, I'm sure you're like this too. It means I have this like huge pile of stories, and I'm like, someday stories, maybe. But yeah, so.
Yeah, I guess I'm more excited about trying to do some new stuff.
Well, that's sort of how
I think that's
I like to operate.
the short
Yeah.
story writer disease. We're always like, what's the next thing?
I'm sort of in this transitionary period where I've written now, and I'll count the novel I trunked, and I'm strong enough to admit that the first one I wrote sucked, because often the first novel you write it's not great. So, but to date I've written about 4 or 5 novels, but I've only had one published
That's
so
a
far.
lot of words.
Yeah, I actually, when I feel like exploding people's faces, because I did the math a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, okay, so I'm sitting on 140,000 words to 180,000 words of unpublished material.
Right.
Which is just like, wow, when I put it like that, it seems like quite a lot. I mean, it is a lot. I'm not going to pretend it isn't a lot of work.
I mean,
But yeah,
I mean, that's great if the story really justifies that length. I'm just not drawn to writing a novel at this point. Like, I'm drawn to a novella length.
Yeah.
And fleshing out a story if it has enough interest. But as a reader, I'm much more attracted to reading short stories, and I like that. I like that really efficient slice of, like a short time, or compacting, even if it's a long time span, compacting past and future into one sort of, crammed together, kind of juxtaposed thing. I just like the energy of short stories a lot. I'm not really a big reader of long, detailed, verbose novels. It's something that doesn't appeal to me as a reader, and therefore I'm not really drawn to doing that as a writer.
Well, it's funny. I'm not, in a weird way, I'm also not drawn to novels, which seems it seems kind of counterintuitive that I've written a bunch of novels now, but yeah, I do. I think of myself more like I don't know what I think of myself like now. I'm sort of in this period
Who
where
knows? I don't either. I don't know what I'm doing.
I've had a few novellas that have done pretty good, like Racerhead Press did Hate from the Sky, which is another one I didn't think anyone was even going to read, and people really loved that. And I was like, wow,
Nice.
really? Okay.
Nice.
But so yeah, I've had a few like little successes with novellas. I'm sort of in between like the 10,000 to 40,000 word mark in terms of my comfort zone. But in terms of what I actually, listen to audiobooks of or read books of, it's like, I like Negative Space, obviously. I'm still reading that from B.R. Yeager. But yeah, I have a hard time with like full novels, which again sounds really weird that I've written a couple new novels now.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. There's this weird sort of disconnect in terms of like, well, this is what I like to read, but like I'm currently writing this huge thing.
Well, I mean, that's valid. You don't necessarily want to write exactly what you're reading. What drives people to do anything creative. It's very unique. It's very individual. And I don't think we can really say exactly where it comes from, like what it really is.
No, I do think that. I mean, there's some stuff when over my life I've tried to like plan, like, okay, next year this is what I'm gonna write. Because when you get into, when you're over 30,000 words, that's like, no matter what, it's a time commitment. So you're looking at least 6 months probably, unless you just really feverishly write it in a couple months. Um, so I had a completely different plan for what I was going to work on this year. And then kind of at random, all these other things came up, and I was like, well, what if I did this? And what if, which I like. I like having the freedom to do that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, but if you asked me last year, like what I was going to be actually working on, I would have told you something completely different than what I'm actually working on.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, just happens. Uh, so we're at about the hour mark. Um,
Oh, that's pretty long. Okay.
yeah. I just let it go how it seems to be going.
You'll cut out anything
I
where I was like rambling or belching, hopefully.
I don't think you belched. I think I belched. I might cut that, but so I do have a thing I do with most of these interviews if I remember. Um, they're more. I think of them as random ass questions. The whole point is to just like have it not be related to anything. Um, which is also when I've actually analyzed that, it's not true. It has to be related to something. Otherwise, I couldn't come up with a question. But it's okay. So I'm gonna go in. Sometimes it tends to be about food. I don't know why.
Because
Um,
food is good.
it is. Food is good. All right, and this is the stressful part where because I don't write them ahead of time. That's sort of the whole point.
Are you just trying to come up with
Um,
something right now?
yeah, that's what I do with every interview. I just kind of
Okay.
pick this really bizarre set of questions, and I don't know where they really come from. Okay. Hmm. If you could meet an alien, would you want to?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that's a fairly easy one. I guess I'd want to too. Um, favorite ice cream flavor?
Coffee.
It's a good choice. Hmm. If you had a piece of clothing that could talk, what piece of clothing would you want to talk?
None of them.
I mean, okay, that's a fair answer.
No, my wardrobe is consigned to silence. No, we're not discussing
Okay.
it.
I was gonna say, I think I'd be okay with a t-shirt. Hopefully, nothing underwear related. That might get awkward. Um, let's see.
Although now that you like that, now that you bring up that question, I'm thinking like, well, what about like my flipper t-shirt from high school that I still have? Like it's been with me my whole life. I have hardly ever worn it. Like what stories does that thing have? So actually it's not a bad question.
it isn't. No, it's definitely a weird one, but that's the whole point. Um, okay, let's end with that. Yeah, that seemed like a good one. These are really hard to come up with, by the way. I don't know if people believe me when I say I make them up too. Like, no, I totally just make them up. I just sit here and like stare at a poster or something and go,
They're kind
but
of like
anyway,
old match game questions or something.
a little bit, yeah.
Or what is that, the
I
dating
started
game
doing
or
it with,
something? Like some
yeah,
weird.
I started doing it with my written interviews because going back to sort of like trying not to be too similar, I would read a lot of interviews and be like, these are all the same questions. So how would I kind of maybe do some of similar questions while also uh, switching things up in a way? And the best way I came up with was like, well, completely random. Because, like, I don't know, I'm fairly sure there's no other interviewers that's asking you, like, what kind of clothing do you want to talk? And it sort of like puts someone in a different headspace. So then when they answer the more regular questions, it's slightly different.
Always
Maybe.
good to be
That's the theory.
slightly different.
It is. Well, anyway, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, it was great talking to you. Thanks for inviting me, and good luck with NICTITATIng Press.
Well, thank you. I'm going to do my best, and I'm probably going to keep it going, even if it does poorly. So,
Yep, that's what we do. We just keep trooping.
So yeah, for Nictitating Books, I've been Sean M. Thompson, and stay tuned. We're gonna have some cool interviews coming your way.